So I finally watched the first episode of the Paramount Plus Halo series, and boy are my eyes tired. That's how that joke works, right? Anyway, by now you've probably heard that the show has a lot of problems, and after spending an hour of my life I'll never get back watching it, I have to say, I agree. This show definitely has some problems. But the question is, which one do I focus on first? I mean, where do I even start with this show? I could start with how the show is formulaic and predictable, has no real sense of mystery. Maybe I should talk about how the show is overly emotional, dragging down the overall sense of adventure. I mean, it is a Paramount Plus series. The trajectory of the Star Trek franchise should give you an indication of where this show will probably go. Maybe I start with how the production lead supposedly didn't even play the games or know the lore, though I doubt that very severely, considering how well the first episode subverts the core foundations of Halo as a franchise. You know what? Why don't we just dive into the episode? Rip the band-aid off. I'm tired of pretending. So we start on a planet in the outer reach of UNSC space. An old veteran is explaining to a young recruit the intricacies of fighting against Spartans. The show begins by immediately setting us against the UNSC, the good guys, as an antagonist. But why would they set up the good guys, Team John Halo, to be the bad guys in this series? Well, don't worry, fellow traveler, that question is answered almost immediately when they introduce the real protagonist of the show, but not before a little Saturday morning setup by the general of this colonial resistance. His daughter is rebellious, outspoken, wild, just like every other female protagonist in the new generation of shows. They introduce her with a shot that looks ripped directly from the Skywalker saga, except the characters look like burned out belters from The Expanse. Seriously, is it a law that you have to have a god-awful haircut to colonize space or something? Unfortunately for the real protagonist of the show, who shall be forever known as Wellwalla, the Covenant decided to attack at this precise moment, or rather a small contingent of elites. Lots of blown up bodies and gore in this scene, which I think Hollywood believes is a proper stand-in for mature storytelling. Wellwalla manages to escape the elites and get back to her village, where the General's Grand Resistance, the one that was set to challenge the UNSC and their Spartans, is waiting to defend their village with AK-47s and mid-2000s Ford Expeditions. 500 years in the future, these guys are using weapons that probably came off some dead Russian at the Ukrainian border. Obviously, they get their asses whooped. Those AKs ain't doing the trick, are they? Until Master Chief and the Silver Squad show up. Despite this being a rather expensive show, the overall quality or lack thereof is immediately striking. The size difference of the Spartans to the elites also doesn't help the Spartans to look too intimidating. Seriously, it's like a child trying to box with Kobe Bryant. The action itself is kind of stupid, with the Chief doing some weird Rock Lee jiu-jitsu style kick, and the elites being cartoonishly dumb at times. Let's not talk about the PS3 era CG, since I'm holding out hope against hope here that the huge budget went somewhere worthwhile. Eventually, Master Chief picks up the minigun, the same minigun the humans were using, by the way, and blows all of the elites away. I guess the real power of the Master Chief is in his damage buffs. Dude must be rocking blessed armor or something. Of course, this is after the Wellwalla loses her father, the general of the entire resistance, in battle to an elite. So these guys thought they could deal with the UNSC, but got canked by a handful of elites. Like, their entire army got canked. Their entire civilization is gone now. UNSA ain't looking too bad now, are they? Well, just you wait. This show's determined to make them the bad guys. This is when the opening credits hit, and my friend pointed out to me that the Spartans were perfect for action figures. Just distinct enough to sell multiple versions, but similar enough to mass produce easily. But honestly, this show is so dreary that I can't really see any kids sticking through to the end. Master Chief and the crew end up in the mountains and encounter what is presumably Forerunner technology, which gives Master Chief visions when he grabs it. A bit of Mass Effect in my Halo? How the tables have turned. It used to be that Mass Effect was the one taking the cues from Halo. Wellwalla wanders through the desert and runs into Silver Squad. Just lucky, I guess. This is where Master Chief decides to break protocol, starting the thread of Master Chief eventually defecting from the Space Marines. Master Chief has to find his own truth, don't you understand? What should be a simple adventure story about Master Chief and his squad fighting aliens across multiple planets is instead going to be an emotionally driven political drama. The hero, Master Chief, who should be the rock which everyone else's story revolves, is instead going to be shaken at his own core. Not very Spartan-like. Next, we meet Dr. Halsey, and let me say, for someone who should be the age of a grandmother, she's holding up pretty well. Old just isn't old anymore in Hollywood. She's having a discussion with the Made in Hong Kong version of The Expanse's ambassador. They eventually talk about cutting Halsey's funding. It's kind of crazy to me that no one seems to be taking the Covenant that seriously, but in many ways, the show is setting itself up as a prequel of sorts. Cortana has not even been created yet, the Outer Worlds are naive to the alien menace, and the Spartans, while feared, aren't seen as necessary by the Earth's government as a whole. It's the proper timeline remixed. They call it the Silver Timeline, an attempt to distance itself from the core property, but I don't think they were thinking that Silver is second place. Though it's weird. In a sick way, I kinda wish they had had enough respect for Star Trek Picard to set it in a different universe. About halfway through the episode, we are finally introduced to the Covenant as a whole. And yes, there is a human in the Covenant. The show is going for some prophecy angle, and the Prophet of Mercy calls the human the Blessed One. Or maybe the Prophet just can't read too good, since they make a really big deal about the Blessed One reading a book. I see the obvious implications of using a Forerunner later on to activate a Halo, but it's once again another unnecessary change, in a strange attempt to be unique, rather than giving fans something that they've been waiting for 10 to 15 years. So now we meet Miranda Keyes, and she asked the Wellwalla to put in a good word for the UNSC, since they stopped the Covenant invasion on your colony, even though you had apparently battled them numerous times, and couldn't defend yourselves. The Wellwalla refuses, and instead tells Miranda Keyes that she's gonna lie, and say the Spartans are the one who committed the attack on her colony. This show is shaping up to be another one of those overly emotional, revolutionary chic girl power stories. Oh, and by the way, the scientists mentioned that the Master Chief's pineal gland has been unlocked, so he's woken up, or he's going through his second puberty. Maybe that's how he'll get tall enough to fistfight an elite without looking comical. He starts to form a kinship with the Wellwalla, which obviously just had an Order 66 put out on her by the UNSC. Order came from the top, they say. Pretty much all you gotta know is that the Authority is evil. The space natives are right, even though the Wellwalla just decided to lie about the attack and break apart the Galactic Federation, thus ensuring mankind's defeat by the Covenant. You would think seeing your entire society wiped out by a handful of elites might make you rethink the whole revolution at any cost mentality. But nope, we live in an age where every piece of media has to be a mirror of real life. Ugly, over-emotional, hyper-political, and yet somehow clownish and silly at the same time. A rip-roaring adventure through space, kicking alien ass and protecting mankind? No! I got a duty in my Spartan suit and I don't care who knows it. In order to 66 the Wellwalla, the space colonists cut off oxygen to the part of the ship the Chief and her are in. They even cut off Chief's personal oxygen, but he manages to hack the ship and survive. They manage to escape in a smaller ship and the UN lady orders them both consolidated. Damn, this chick is bloodthirsty. I didn't realize that the Spartans were so disposable. Halsey orders Silver Team to secure and protect the Master Chief, even against other Marines. Somehow, a show based on a property that's about a war between humans and aliens now has humans ordering each other consolidated, and our hero going AWOL. The whole thing's been turned on its head in a single episode. Even if we do get to the inevitable human-alien war, there won't even be anyone for you to cheer for. Everyone and everything will be morally gray. Real heroes aren't allowed anymore. Well, not unless they side with the revolution. Master Chief then commits the cardinal sin of Halo by revealing his face to the random colonists that he met maybe 6 hours ago.
Neuron deactivation.
There is no real reason for it in the scene, no justification, as it's really just for a bunch of predictable melodrama. But the reality is that this is the ultimate subversion of Master Chief's character. Master Chief in the games was an effortlessly strong male archetype. He is the mountain upon which all waves break, which allows other characters to define themselves against his consistency, and allows the player to effortlessly insert themselves into the story, and stay grounded against all the dramatic things happening around you. No matter what, Chief was always sure of himself, which makes you and everyone else around him feel safe. including those tiny little baby Marines you gotta take care of. Not so in the new Halo show. Chief is just as emotionally damaged as every other character. Nothing really makes him a better soldier than any other Marine. Not emotional stability, not his stature, just a couple of cheap CGI backflips and a whole load of member berries. Master Chief touches the artifact again and learns that he was kidnapped as a child and abducted into the Spartan program. Here's where the show will be attempting a blasé deconstruction of something that was more or less a backdrop to the drama of the alien-human war. If you played the games exclusively, you probably don't even know this bit of information, as the games were intentionally light on Chief's history, so as to allow the player to invest themselves fully in the experience without being bogged down by heavy human emotions. Heavy human emotions that take you away from the everyman aspect of Master Chief. Master Chief, truthfully, is very similar to old school Superman, which many modern writers see as a bad thing. To them, every hero has to be flawed, confused about their own nature, and struggling against some sort of authority. But do they come out with original characters to overlay their tortured emotional states onto? No, of course not, because that would require real creativity. And if you don't know the infamous token quote by now, you're gonna know it very well by the end of 2022.
Evil cannot create anything new, they can only corrupt and ruin what good forces have invented or made.
Chief departs with his helmet off, and he's probably gonna keep it off for most of the series. I don't have to get into why Chief, as a masked enigma, is central to his character. I already did, but I gotta admit, it's one of the things I hated the most about late stage Marvel. I'm talking terminal Marvel. Nobody can seem to keep their freaking masks on. It's a weird idea in Hollywood that people can't connect with a character without seeing their face. But of course, we all know a major reason Halo is popular in the first place, why the show even exists, is because of Master Chief's short-spoken, enigmatic, iconic character. It's a bad case of trying to fix what isn't broken. To appeal to a wider audience, which will probably find the whole thing silly, because your protagonist looks like she's going to a Matrix-style orgy in a Chinese wet market. I probably won't make another video about this show until the end of the season. It's like going to the dentist if you have a bunch of cavities. Why would you go a bunch of times and extend your suffering? Might as well get it done in one large, mentally scarring experience, and deal with the PTSD for the rest of your life. Peace and love, everyone.
Thanks for watching, everyone. Drop a like and subscribe so you don't miss a video. Peace and love.